On July the 5th, 1948, Britain became the first Western country to offer free medical care to its entire population.
Well, that day, they didn't tell us what was going on, but as patients, you knew something was going on because all the nurses were running about like, you know, blue-tailed flies. And we knew that the matron was in a bad mood.
We had very short notice that 2 wards had been chosen. So we were issued with white, clean counterpanes. We went and did all the corners and threatened any male patient he was not to get out of bed on any pretext at all. They were all there sitting up, looking healthy with these white counterpanes.
Eventually, one of the nurses told us that Aaron Bevan was going to come to the hospital. He was going to inaugurate the National Health Service, this wonderful system.
Sylvia Diggory, then 13 years old, became the National Health Service's official first patient. And as she recalls, Bevan charmed even the matron out of her bad mood.
He was very, very witty, full of vigour. You know, when you come across a human being who is bursting with life. And this combination won her over in about the first picosecond. And he had a dream, and his dream showed. And he was getting his dream.
I think I must have had some minors as patients on the ward, and within moments they were leaping out of the bed, trying to attract his attention, standing on the lockers, the beds were all in disarray, shouting, "Come over here, sir, come over here, sir, I want to talk to you, I'm an ex-miner." And it was chaotic. All that work beforehand, immaculate counterpanes.
Elsewhere on that day, the extent of unmet medical need became dramatically apparent. At Hammersmith Hospital, the police had to be called out 2 nights in a row to control the queues of patients that had begun forming in anticipation. But the most remarkable scenes were played out not in hospitals, but in the surgeries of ordinary GPs.
I certainly found, when the health service started on the 5th of July, 48, that for the next 6 months I had as many as 20 or 30 ladies came to see me who had the most unbelievable gynecological conditions. I mean, of that 20 or 30, there'd be at least 10 who had complete prolapse of their womb, and they had to hold it up with a towel as if they had a large nappy on.
So do you think their lives were changed completely, almost in a day?
Oh yes, definitely. But an awful lot of people's lives were changed by the health service.
In 1948, Dr. Pat Rawlance began working as a country GP. He too discovered extremes of silent suffering caused by the reluctance to call the doctor.
The country people in Norfolk were very, very poor. There were people who'd been in bed for years and years. Well, I mean, there were long-standing cases of tuberculosis just quietly dying away in homes, you know.
But with the coming of the NHS, even the most stoic of sufferers got treatment.
Well, this old lady, I was told that she'd been in bed for 15 years, and would I come and see what could be done about her? So I'd been seeing her for 2 or 3 months, I think, on and off. And one day she said to me, "Would you go upstairs and see my husband? He's been in bed for 9 years."
With the burden of payment lifted, patients were also instantly more willing to call out the doctor in what appeared to be emergencies.
A man I knew got a call late at night on July the 5th from a remote farmhouse. The wife of the farmer said, "Doctor, can you come at once? We think Father's had a stroke." So he jumped into his car and rushed out. And when he got out there, to his surprise, there was no light showing, and he rang the bell, and somebody opened the window up above and said, "Oh, is that you, doctor?" "Oh, it's all right. He'd simply got both legs into one leg of his pajamas."
Other health workers also found the new day brought a new attitude from their patients. In July 1948, George Wynne was working as a male nurse in Manchester. One patient was particularly grateful for his attention.
The day before nationalisation, he thanked me very much. He did realise that I spent more time with him than I should. Right, thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
The next day, July the 5th, 1948, George got a shock.
8:15, a voice boomed out, "Hey Jack, how much longer am I going to have to wait?" And who was it but the man yesterday was "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I told him not to talk to me in that manner, and his reply was, "Why not? You're nothing but a so-and-so civil servant." So we then became civil servants.
In the first year of the NHS, the scale of demand took almost everyone by surprise. Production of spectacles was stepped up as a 5-month wait developed, and dentist after dentist found themselves booked solid.
When the NHS came along, everybody dashed to the dentist, the opticians, the doctor, the hospitals. I mean, literally dashed along. They went a bit mad, you know. And I personally went and got 2 pairs of glasses.
The ambulance would draw up, the doors would open, and out would come hordes of people, elderly people. The elderly ladies would want their varicose veins doing. The men would want sebaceous cysts removing. Why? Does it hurt you? No. Why do you want it removing? It's free. Everything's free.
In the first 2 years, the drug bill tripled from 13 to 41 million pounds. Bevan admitted, "I shudder to think of the ceaseless cascade of medicine which is pouring down British throats." But not everything was going down their throats.
One old dear used to ask me every week, "Please may I give her a roll of cotton wool?" I did this for about 6 weeks. Then I said, "What's the matter, dear? Why do you need so much cotton wool? Do you have leg ulcers and you wrap them up in the cotton wool?" "Nay, lad," she said, "I'm stuffing tea cosies."
It wasn't just patients who took unfair advantage of the new system, as Charlie Bannister discovered in the chemist shop he now ran.
I shall never forget it. Doctors coming in with the pads in their hands, writing anything they can think of. Rolls of cotton wool, very, very expensive, gauze tissues, all sorts of things. And they used to say, "Well, can we think of anything else?"
For their patients?
For themselves.
Right, so it was abuse straight away.
Abuse straight away. I could do nothing.
And they'd load this all up and
then
take
get
it away.
Our staff from our chemists to take it out to their waiting cars.
They weren't alone. Dentists who got a particularly good deal under the NHS were paid by the filling.
We'll make hay while the sun shines. We'll make love when it rains. Take me.
But temptation got the better of a dentist Jerry Woodliff had just employed.
After he'd been there for about an hour, his nurse came in to me and she was very embarrassed. She said, "It's not my business, but we just had a patient in that you have examined and who you had marked requiring one filling."
Said yes. 1 filling.
And he's just done 14 fillings in 10 minutes, he said.
What did he say?
Well, he said, "I think you're crazy." He said, "You're sitting on a fortune here."
The need to modernise below-standard hospitals and purchase new equipment all added to the bill. In the first 3 years, the NHS budget rose from £200 million to 300 to nearly £400 million. With costs apparently spiralling out of control, the government dispatched MP Stephen Taylor in an abortive attempt to reassure the public.
When I pretend I'm gay, I never feel that way. I'm only painting the clouds with sunshine.
So far, the National Health Service has been getting along remarkably smoothly. Indeed, far better than we had dared to hope. Millions of you have got those spectacles you need, and tens of millions of you have visited the doctor under the scheme and got your medicine. Provided we're reasonable in our demands, particularly during the coming months when always at its heaviest, there's no danger whatever that the National Health Service will break down.
The spectacular rise in costs was the exact opposite of what had been envisaged in the Beveridge report. Beveridge had believed that the cost of a free health service would fall, not rise over time, because people would become more and more healthy, and healthy people wouldn't need treatment. Instead, Bevan was forced to go back to the cabinet again and again to ask for more money.
Cannon guns blast Red troops moving up for the attack on Daegu.
In 1950, with the Chinese invasion of Korea, the money finally ran out. Martial aid from America had been crucial in funding the new NHS. But now American pressure forced Britain to divert funds to a massive rearmament programme. Spending on the NHS was frozen. A year later, despite protests from Bevan, Attlee's cabinet ended the completely free health service and brought in charges for dentures and spectacles.
I remember having a phone call in the morning told to bring my typewriter down to Cliveden Place. Something was afoot. And I remember typing the actual letter that was sent to Attlee.
In the letter announcing his resignation, Bevan wrote, "It is the beginning of the destruction of those social services in which Labour has taken a special pride, and which were giving Britain the moral leadership of the world." But the infant NHS survived the cap on spending. Instead of continuing to spiral out of control, over the next few years expenditure flattened out. And one of the main reasons was simple good fortune.
We were very lucky. Of course, penicillin come in towards the end of the war, and just as the NHS was starting a lot of other antibiotics which could deal with things that penicillin couldn't.
In the first 10 years of the NHS, the number of beds needed to treat infectious diseases fell by 3/4, and child mortality halved. There is an argument that the health service is terribly overrated because what mattered was the introduction of new drugs to treat diseases, and that actually wouldn't have mattered what system there was, health would have improved.
Well, that's quite untrue. Could people have got the new drugs? Could they have got the treatments? The answer is that in many cases, no. Unless they could afford to call a doctor in and could afford to pay for the drug, they wouldn't have had it. So the National Health Service was just as important as the introduction of the new therapies.
In 1953, I was told that my husband was suffering very badly with TB of the lungs. They used to have an injection of streptomycin every day, and the nurses used to tell us it was £1 an injection. No way could we have afforded such marvellous treatment for him to be here and cured and better today, only for the national health.
When Charlie Chaplin, who'd grown up in the slums of London, returned to the country of his birth in 1952, he was in no doubt about the effects of the NHS.
I used to look up at those little pale faces of the Cockney kids where I came from, with their rotten teeth and everything else, and one felt impotent about it. But today you have social medicine, and I think it's doing a great deal. I've seen rosy-cheeked children, bright, vigorous, active, smiling up with confidence. They are the future of England. If for nothing else, socialized medicine, if I may say so. It's a grand thing for that reason.
By the time the Labour government fell in 1951, the National Health Service was so firmly established that no subsequent government could even contemplate dismantling it. They might argue about the means, but no one would dispute the end. But if the lives and expectations of ordinary people had been transformed, the failings we now regard as modern, waiting lists, shortages, and allegations of waste, were already apparent. Yet Bevan saw these problems in an entirely different light. He said at the time, "We will never have all we need. This service must always be growing, changing, and improving. It must always appear to be inadequate." And perhaps that's the point. The fact that